Welcome to episode 6 of CyberBytes the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. Today's guest, we have Field CISO Robert Wagner. We talk about his untraditional career change into security, his track from third shift analyst to Field CISO and what that role actually involves. Robert clearly cares about the industry. He's spoken at many conferences and delivered various workshops, and he even managed to scare me about the effects of AI. What's great about Robert is he loves sharing and solving executive security problems, even if it means promoting other security solutions. How are you?
Good, Joseph. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Really well. I guess you're no stranger to a podcast or a keynote, so I'm really excited about this one.
No, I am too. This is so awesome. Thank you for inviting me to be on. Yeah.
Nice. I saw you've got a couple of conferences coming up that you made panel for.
Yep, I do. I'm going to be speaking at B-Sides Rochester and CypherCon in Milwaukee this month, and then have a couple more in the future. And I'm applying for yet more. So
yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I'm guessing we be at RSA, or is that still unknown yet?
That's unknown. RSA is expensive.
Mega.
So, especially the housing. It can get really pricey.
100%. Yeah. Well, I'm obviously in the UK, and our flight alone was astronomical. But
right.
Anyways, so look, Robert, with all my guests, I've been taking it right back to sort of where you're from and how you got into security.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, so back when I got started, there was no information security programs, right? Not a whole lot of people know this, but I actually had a degree in liberal arts with a lot of theater thrown into that. So, and it's been good for me. I mean, it's certainly helped me out in my career. But I mention it because of something that you and I were talking about. And I think one of the things that I think more security hiring managers should do is look for people from atypical backgrounds. I know so many musicians that are awesome security people, awesome security analysts. I think it's part because music is math and music is patterns, but they see patterns amazingly well. So they can make for a great security analyst or an incident responder, things like that. So look for people that didn't come up through. I know someone who's in VISOC right now that used to be a nanny.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And she's doing amazingly well. So you'd be surprised where you can get great security talent from.
Yeah, 100%. So did you plan to be like an actor then, or what was the plan?
Yeah, well, I'd certainly thought about it and played around with it a little bit, but this is a face made for radio more than television. So I just wasn't pretty enough.
No, got it. So obviously you did your university course, then how did it all spin and spiral into the security field then?
Right. So I'd gotten into IT support initially, because back then, if you could spell the word computer, you could probably get a job in IT, right? Most people that were using computers were doing their own configurations and stuff like that. And so those skills could typically get you a job. But as I was progressing through that, I started hearing about all these very interesting security related things, right? The various attacks that people were doing against Microsoft Windows and stuff. And I just found it fascinating. So I dove into that. I really just wanted to find out as much as I could. I took a couple of like boot camp type classes just to get me kicked off. And then just aggressively started applying for jobs and finally landed one. I was a third shift SOC analyst. So
wow.
And we only had one person in the SOC at any one time. So we ran a 24/7 SOC with only 4 people. Now, there wasn't as much to deal with back then either, right? I mean, this was back in the day when Code Red was going around and maybe SQL Slammer and Sasser and things like that. But it still kept us busy. I mean, we were constantly trying to hunt things down. And a lot of that was manual, like literally like scrolling through firewall logs and looking for and maybe setting up a filter based on something you just read about the latest attack that was out there.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how it's evolved so much since
Oh
back
my
in the day
God.
when you was in that first role. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
started in third shift, and then what happened? Where was we after that? How long did you spend in that role?
So the third shift SOC analyst, I was only there for maybe 12 to 18 months. And I was doing such a good job that I got promoted up into engineer, and then analyst. An engineer and then eventually architect.
Nice.
That was a good progression, and it was a natural progression, right? I kept learning more. I kept applying what I learned. Made great improvements for the organization. Made great suggestions. So it was that effort to constantly grow that got me moved up through the ranks.
Yeah, that's a really nice natural transition from analyst, engineer, architect as well. So
Yeah.
what was the role after that?
Eventually I ended up transitioning into a technical account manager at Qualys. And the whole thing came about very, very interesting. So back at that time, I was desperate for a SIM, right? But we just didn't have the budget. We couldn't get a SIM. But I did know, as things were kind of transitioning from your older attacks like a buffer overflow on port 445 to someone emailing a malicious PDF. What I really needed to do as that was happening was I simply needed to know what version of Adobe Reader that the host was running if I actually saw a intrusion detection rule fire that, from all I could tell, looked like a legit malicious PDF. So I put a lot of pressure on SourceFire, who was our intrusion detection system at the time, to write API calls to Qualys and just bring that data in. So I'd have it right there. You could just compare the two data points. SourceFire could actually do it for me automatically and just change how critical that alert was. And then the critical ones would bubble up to the top. I had to put a lot of grassroots pressure on them. I literally asked the SE to get me the names for other people at other clients. And I called FedEx and I called Disney and I said, I have this great idea, but they won't do it just for me. Could you please add your name to my feature request?
Yeah.
And they not only did they finally build it for me, it worked so well that Apple themselves refused to buy SourceFire unless they GA'd the feature.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and at that point, Qualys was like, "Wow, you do some good work. Do you want to come and work for us?" And I was game, right? New adventure, sure, why not? And so I went to go work for them, and ever since moving over to the vendor side, I've gravitated to roles that allow me to help clients, right? I'm not about selling them product. I'm more about, what are you struggling with? And I find this is a common theme in most companies is people get too hung up on shiny object syndrome, right? They get too engrossed in the technology and they forget about process and they forget about people. So my job ever since moving into a strategic advisor role at Splunk has been to just say, show me what you're doing. Tell me what you're trying to solve. And I'm going to help you solve that problem, even if it's not a solution from the company I'm working for.
Yeah.
Right? I tell salespeople all the time, hey, if the customer says business email compromise is their biggest problem, I'm going to be telling them they need two-factor authentication, right now, right? So that's been my approach, and it's been great because I have, I think, really helped a lot of organizations. A few of my peers had written workshops when I was at Splunk, and I would teach those workshops around the country, just trying to help people get better.
100%. So you spent what, six years at Splunk?
A little over 5, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So quite a long tenure there. For those that don't know who Splunk are, can you just give a quick intro on that?
Oh yeah. So Splunk is an amazing way to search data, right? They can basically take data in from just about any source, at least a time series source, and allow you to do searches and manipulations on that data for anything. Now, in the security space, obviously, what you're going to do is you're going to look through security logs and look for indicators of compromise, indicators of attack, things that would show you data from various sources. So you're vulnerable. The stuff I was trying to do when I was working with Splunk and with SourceFire and Qualys, trying to get the vulnerability state of the system, indicators that would show you someone's moving through your systems, doing lateral movement, stuff like that. So nice. It's a really, really effective tool, and it's really fun to teach workshops for it too. I'm doing it. Yeah.
It's definitely one of the ones I see a lot of businesses utilizing. So why did you spend so long there? So it's a long time, 6 years.
Yeah. So I was certainly growing through the role, right? So I started off as just the title itself, and ended up moving all the way up the ranks through senior of that role. And God, I was just having so much fun doing it. It was a blast. I would take like the workshops to hacker conferences. I would get to travel all over and just consult with customers and try and help them figure out usually some sort of get better plan, right? Yeah. Some way to help them mature their program. And it was a blast.
So what specifically is a field CISO then?
So, I don't know if we could say specifically, because I've probably seen at least half a dozen different takes on it. What it means for me is I get to take all the knowledge that I've accumulated over, it's been about 20 years now, and try to help people figure out ways around their problems, right? Try to help them mature their programs, try to lend them the benefit of my experience, really, at the end of the day. So, it touches a little bit on customer success. It touches a little bit on customer assurance. And in general, I just look for ways for me to help make organizations better. They do.
I'm going to read this out. So I've read you proactively partner with sales to grow the bottom line, which I found really interesting. So how do you go about that?
Oh, right. So again, I never think of it from the aspect of sales, but the way it helps sales out is if you have a customer that's successful at what they do, there's a good chance that you've won their respect and you've won their business. And if you help them solve, like with Splunk, if we also found new problems that we could solve with the tool itself, that would certainly, expand the sale for the salespeople as well. But the great thing is I never had to worry about that, right? I could come in with a knowledge of like, hey, I don't care if you buy it or not, just tell me what you're doing. And I think customers respect that, right? Just being able to have that conversation and be like, let's not be so worried about buying things. Let's be worried about what's going to make you better. So the salespeople certainly appreciate it. Some of them were a little surprised because it's a little unorthodox, right? It's a little bit Miracle on 34th Street, right? Where you're telling people to go possibly to another product to solve their problem. But if that was the right answer, that was the right answer.
But I guess that shows a real testament to you. It shows you care, right? I know that you care about this industry just from your constant contributions to all the conferences and the keynotes that you do. I want to pick on the conferences because this is a big one.
Yeah,
I have seen you at loads. One thing that caught my interest was obviously coming from like a defensive career. Yeah. How come you're so involved in a lot of the offensive conferences?
Right. There's a couple reasons why. So the first is I certainly found that hacker cons compared to other conferences that may not be led by researchers, but may be more led by vendors, The HackerCons tend to have some of the freshest information out there, right? They're often on cutting edge of technique and things like that. So the information itself was insanely valuable. And even though it's offensive in nature, the fact that even though I'm not going to take that information and necessarily go hacking my own organization, I learned so much about that attack, because as I'm sitting there listening to that person's attack, I'm sitting there thinking, how would I stop this? And what's great is a lot of researchers will themselves say, oh, and if you want to stop this, in fact, one of my presentations is literally me taking notes at all the HackerCons I went to and going, this is a real easy way to stop this attack or defend against this kind of thing. So it's just been so incredibly helpful to my defensive career to actually hang out with attackers and hear what they're doing, hear what they have to say, even hear their funny stories about goofy things that they did, right? Like there was a pen testing friend who had done a pen test on a company that had these little automated medical carts that would ship things around in a hospital. And he uploaded an MP3 of it, of whistling If I Only Had a Brain. And the little cart right. So those kind of things it's fun to listen to what they do. And it's also incredibly informative. So I love to participate in that community. But I think the one I think I have the most fun at is I helped found a charity, a non-for-profit called Hack for Kids.
Okay.
And what we do is we teach kids about information security, safety, and ethics. Basically, we're kind of, most kids, if they have any sort of, even through the media now, they don't even have to have a technical leaning. They just think hacking is fascinating and cool. So we're using kind of the lure of hacking, but what we're really doing is letting them explore STEM skills, right? Anything from, we will have an activity around snap circuits, which is kind of like Legos for electrical circuits. To sumo bots, where they try to program these little bots to push the other bot out of a circle or something like that. And the kids have a great time. It's been very rewarding participating in that.
Yeah, I bet. I actually got asked to deliver go into a local school in the UK and go to the careers fair. And what I did, I put together a 5-minute video, and I got I think it was 6 in the end, 6 InfoSec professionals to explain why a career in information security is so great. And I got people from all around the world, so Lean in Dubai, Israel, the US, wow. UK. I'll send it to you after this, and I'll put it in the show notes for anyone interested. But I'm going in next week and going to be sharing that, and just to inspire folks, to give them an idea about some of the cool careers that are in security. So no, that's an amazing initiative.
That's fantastic.
No,
that'll be a great resource.
100%. One of your talks really made me chuckle, and is artificial intelligence going to throw us off a cliff or give us wings to evolve? We won't go into much detail about it, but what exactly was that for anyone that is maybe interested in that? Because obviously AI has been a big topic of conversation at the minute, particularly.
Oh, sure. So that was interesting. That started off actually as a collaboration between me and another researcher in the space, Chris Roberts. And unfortunately, he ended up with a conflict and we couldn't do it together. But both of us had been talking about, and this was a few years ago, and people were really putting a lot of faith in AI, especially the people that were developing AI systems and things like that. And nobody was talking about all of the problems that we were seeing in AI, right? Just 2 quick examples I gave during the talk, but one was a picture of some snow, and the AI had determined that was a wolf because it had been constantly fed pictures of wolf where there was snow in the picture. So when it saw snow, it was like, oh, that's a wolf. But even worse was there was I can't remember where it was now, but there was a trial done where they were feeding an AI sentencing data to try and make an impartial sentencing system so that it wouldn't be, more sympathetic to white people versus people of color.
Yeah.
And what they found out was all this backlog of data that had been prejudiced against non-whites taught the AI to be prejudiced against non-whites. So it was still giving horrible sentences. Yeah, right. So, and the scariest thing was during the final keynote at the end of the conference, there was a fella who had worked with several of the large FANG companies, and way back in the early days. And he told us that one of the things that he was most concerned about is, the algorithms just do what they're supposed to. So algorithms for social media, their number one job is to get faster responses more often, right? Unfortunately, people tend to respond faster when they feel anger or hate than when they feel happiness or joy. So much like, chickens pecking at a light to get their little pellet of food, it's been conditioning people to respond right? This is the effect it has on us. And one of the students, and this was done at a college, one of the students stood up and said, yeah, but can we deny that, these social media platforms are wonderful things? I mean, they find people, organ transplants and lost relatives. And he's like, no, that is not, that is just an accidental byproduct of the social media platforms. That is not the platform itself helping people. And and the kid was a bit taken aback. People were like, why was he so mean? And I'm like, he's so mean because people aren't getting it. People aren't realizing that no, that's not really the intent of the platform itself.
No, got you. Well, man, we could talk for hours, Robert. I know we could. So let's wrap this up. One final question. Who do you really respect in the industry, and would you recommend people check out their content or research or whatever it might be? Oh, wow. You can name a couple, or if there's one that really you think that person.
Can I just bring up a list of 500 here?
I know I didn't prepare you for this question, and I like having that.
So there's a lot of people that really, really give heavily to this community. People like Hacks for Pancakes, InfoSec Taylor Swift, Wolfgang Gorelick, Malware Jake, Tanya Kaki, another person who handles Bind. I could keep going, but
that's amazing.
Fabulous, yeah.
Man, Robert, it's been great chatting with you, brother. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully I'll see you at RSA.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope so as well.
Cheers, Robert.